Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Paul Merrill. I am the founder of Beaufort Fairmont Automated Testing Services, and I'm also the principal software engineer and test here. We work with companies on test automation to help you grow in your test automation through training. We do consulting to help people get started with test automation and get over whatever humps they have with regard to test automation. And also, we can handle test automation for you if you want to do that. We're so happy to have Angie Jones here with us today. Say hi, Angie.
Hello.
And so happy to have each of you with us here today. I'm going to get us kicked off here. There's a couple of points of business to go over very quickly, but let me figure out what I'm sharing here and make sure I've got the right screen up. It looks like I do. And go back to, there we go, great. So you should be able to see, and I believe you can see, myself and Angie as well as the screen share, how to become a test automation engineer. So Angie came on a couple months ago and did a session for us, a webinar for us, and it was terrific. It was about object-oriented programming in test automation. So make sure to go back and watch that recording out on beaufortfairmont.com/webinars if you're interested in that sort of thing. And all of our previous webinars are out there. So make sure to check those out. We have quite a few now, ones that I've done, Angie's done. The next one that we have coming up, make sure to mark your calendar. It's on the 17th of January. It's about service virtualization, and my friend Boz Dijkstra is coming to join us online from the Netherlands at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that is a Wednesday, the 17th of January. I will be doing a presentation with Sealights. If you're not aware of who Sealights is, go look them up. They have a really cool product that helps you understand coverage at the code level for your testing. So I'll be doing a webinar with them about machine learning and testing on the 30th of January at 12 noon Eastern Time. And then finally, if you haven't heard about TISCA, TISCA is the Triangle Information Systems Quality Association. We're based here in the Research Triangle in North Carolina. We have a great conference, and we do it every couple years in February. This year is the 27th and 28th. Mark your calendar for that. The price is amazing. The lineup is amazing. The partners are amazing. We're going to have a wonderful time over those 2 days. Go out to this link that I've got here, bit.ly/conf-TISCA, or search for TISCA online and you can find it very quickly. Make sure to hang on today, the last piece of information, hang on until the end of the program because I'll be giving away, once again, a $50 Amazon gift card. So anyone who's sticking around until the end has a chance for that. And also please fill out the survey at the end. But without further ado, let me introduce Angie Jones. She is a senior software engineer in test at Twitter. I hope I got that right, Angie.
Yep.
And she's going to be talking about how to become a test automation engineer. Angie is a good friend of mine. I always love working with her and spending time with her. I'm so happy that she can do this. Thanks for being here. And I'm going to hand this off to you, Angie.
Okay. Let me get us.
And I'm going to,
Hi,
I will be
everyone.
around.
Paul, can you see my? Okay, yes. Here we go. Perfect. And
let me say one more thing as we get started here. Everybody, please feel free to write questions into the console from GoToWebinar, the control panel. Write questions in there. We will take breaks throughout, and we'll also have a couple polls as we go through. So write your questions down in there, and Angie will get to them as we go. Off we go.
cool. Can you see my screen, Paul?
Yes, I can.
Perfection. Hi, everyone. I'm Angie Jones, and I am an automation engineer at Twitter in San Francisco. I blog about automation techniques and strategies at angiejones.tech, and I am on Twitter at techgirl1908. So you can follow me there. You can subscribe to my newsletter to get lots of goodies about test automation. Today I'm going to go over how to become an automation engineer. So I've worked with a lot of people who have had an interest in transferring into this type of role. Some have come from testing. Most of them have come from testing. A few have come from development. And I get this question quite often, probably at least once a month. So this is a great opportunity for me to just kind of put all of my ideas out here and give those to you all. Okay. So, first of all, what is an automation engineer? An automation engineer is someone who essentially automates repeatable tasks. In testing, that's a specific role where someone automates test scenarios, essentially. And an automation engineer typically is a hybrid type of role where you have a developer skill set, but a tester's mindset. And so it's really interesting because usually we'll get either testers or developers who are trying to transition into this role, and they may be lacking that other skill set. Okay, so I'll go over how you can basically become this hybrid professional. Now, I have 3 high-level points that I'll share with you, and this is essentially a path of how do you actually become an automation engineer. So let's go through those. The first one, this isn't easy, but you need to learn a code. So if you already know how to code, that's great. If you don't, this is definitely a skill that you have to pick up. So I see a lot of people who come from a testing background and they don't necessarily know how to program, and they try to jump right into the automation piece of this. And it's very difficult for them because they don't necessarily understand the foundational principles of programming in general. So my guideline is to start here. This should be your first point before you even worry about automation. Learn how to program in general. Okay, there's a couple of options for how you can go about doing this. First one is a do-it-yourself method. So with do-it-yourself, you essentially can look online for books or online classes or tutorials, right? There's a couple of pros and cons with this. The pros of doing it yourself is that you can learn at your own pace. So that's really cool. You don't necessarily have that pressure of a class environment, and you control the pace and the method at which you learn, right? So you know yourself best. Another pro is that you can focus on what you need. So when you're picking up any programming language, there's going to be some things that are applicable to whatever job you're going to do, and some things that I call fluff. But if you're doing it yourself and basically creating your own curriculum, then you can pick out how you focus and what it is that you focus on. Some of the cons of doing it yourself: it requires a great level of discipline. So I'm a type of person that I don't really do well on self-paced courses, especially ones that expand for a very long time. So I've taken some classes, not around automation, but like when I want to pick up a new programming language or learn something about maybe like developing mobile apps or something like that. It takes me a very long time to get through the course, which it goes with the pro of being able to pace yourself, but it takes me much longer than I would want to because I'm not disciplined enough to find the time and dedicate it to the coursework. And that goes into finding the free time. So this is a difficult thing to do for a lot of professionals. You know, we're at work, we have other hobbies that we do after work. Some people have children that they need to take care of. I don't have kids, and I still can't really manage to find free time. So I can't imagine for parents how difficult this must be. So it's definitely a con. And then also, I talked about being able to build your own curriculum and finding what it is you want to focus on. But if you're new to this, you're not really sure what it is that you're supposed to be focused on. So that's quite the challenge as well. Another option, if you don't want to do it yourself, is to get formal training. This is the option that I personally recommend for people. And getting formal training is you can get a consultant to come in and maybe do some training for you and other colleagues, or a really good idea that I think is to enroll in a class, a physical old school class, like at a community college, for example. So there aren't classes on automation per se at the colleges, but there are classes on programming languages. So you can enroll, and not necessarily like a degree, but it's like a one-off class where you can say, okay, I'd like to take a class in Java, for example, and spend a semester doing that. Yes, a semester, it could be a long time, like about 4 months, but for someone like myself, that really helps because I have to be there. I'm getting assignments, hands-on experience, and so I learn better in this type of atmosphere. So some of the pros to getting formal training is that dedicated time to learn. So I know class is on this day and this day every week at a certain time. I have to be there if I want to get the material. So that's really helpful. Also, usually things like this, like bringing someone in or going to a class, these are things that are usually covered under your training budget at work. So if you're unsure about that, just be sure to contact your manager and say, hey, you know, I want to develop my skills further. Is there some training budget for me to do this? And this was something I had to learn. No one told me, hey, we have training budget that you can go and spend. What do you want to take? It wasn't like that. It was something I had to learn to ask about. And when I asked about it at various different companies I've worked at, the answer was always yes. So be sure to ask about that. Also, you get a breadth of coverage. So I talked about being able to focus on certain things that you need. And then I also talked about not knowing what you need. If you focus here on just everything that they're giving you in this course, some of it you might need immediately, some of it you might not need until later on. Most of the things in programming I need. There are a couple of things that I haven't used in all the years I've been doing this, but most of the stuff has come in very helpful. In automation, a lot of times we talk about the different automation tools and learning to use the tools, but the tools only get me so far. In my job, I always have to program additional things as well, not just related to the tools that I'm using, but other logic and things like that that are needed. So for loops, while loops, if else conditions, data structures, all of those things that you learn in a programming class comes in handy in automation as well. Some cons of going this formal route, you will need to convince management, especially if you're going to use your work time to do this, right? And usually they're on board with this, especially if automation is one of their objectives as well. So find a way to just tie it into your company's goals, and it's usually easier to convince them that way to get the dedicated time you need to focus on this. And also, if you get that dedicated time, like work time, to do the training, then you don't have to worry about trying to do this stuff on your off time and trying to find free time. Another con is, again, they're going to probably cover more than what you need. So some of the stuff, it's kind of hard to stay focused when you don't see what you can actually apply that to. But my recommendation is just try to get as much of the info as you need. Hopefully at the end of your training, you'll have these materials in some kind of textual form that you can refer back to later. So even if it doesn't make complete sense in that moment, maybe it will later. Okay. So in either one of these paths, you still have to make this decision of, all right, what programming language should I use, and I see this question all the time, at least once or twice a week, where people who are getting started aren't really sure of what language they should pick up. They understand that, yeah, I need to learn how to code, but there's dozens of programming languages, and I'm not sure which one is best suited for automation. So let me try to help you out a little bit with that. I recently did a job search, and in that job search, I did a little research to poll the languages that were being asked for in automation roles. And this is what I found. This could vary based on location. So this is more of like a US type of representation. If you are somewhere else, this could be different based on the companies that are in your area. But by far, Java was the most popular language required for the automation roles that I reviewed. Surprisingly to me, Python was second. So when I learned how to program, Python wasn't a thing. So I'm not well versed in Python, but it seems that more and more automation shops are looking to Python to build their automation solutions. And from what I hear, I've done a little bit of Python, but I'm not an expert at all. But from what I hear, it's a much easier language to pick up than Java, with a lot of less bloat in the language. So that might be a good place to start. JavaScript was third most requested language, followed by Ruby and then C#. I expected C# to be higher, but it was the least requested language, surprisingly. Okay. Other things that you want to pick up. So programming, yes, you want to pick that up, but you also need to understand web technologies and how they work. I can't stress how helpful this has been for me. So I know Java really well. I'm pretty good in using different automation tools, but understanding HTML, the DOM, which is the document object model, understanding CSS and XPath, and then also SQL to be able to query databases. These things have been extremely beneficial to me in my role as an automation engineer. So fortunately, you can probably look for a class that is focused on web development. So it won't be automation related, but usually there'll be like a how to build a website type of class at, again, a local community college, or even online. There's a guy, Mark Winteringham, who just recently launched a course, and he focuses on how the web is built and touches on these technologies. But any class you find around how to build a website, for example, will cover on these things, and also will throw in probably another programming language as well, such as JavaScript or PHP. That's really helpful. You might not use that language in automation, or you might, because JavaScript is one on the list. PHP, not necessarily. But what's also really useful is picking up another language and making sure that you understand the programming concepts enough that you can switch languages, right? So that I've realized recently, like this year, when I started working at Twitter. So Java is my primary language. For the past several years, I haven't really had to deal with any other languages. I know other ones, but I haven't had to necessarily work with them much. Now, when I came here to Twitter, I work on multiple projects, and some of them are in different languages. So I can go, like today, I'm going to code in Java, and I'm also going to code in Swift today, right? I didn't know Swift before I came here, and so it was a really good exercise to be able to take what I do know about programming, because a lot of the concepts are not specific to a language, right? Object-oriented concepts, the decision structures, the data structures, all of those things are things that you can use in any language pretty much, right? And so when I came to Twitter and I needed to learn Swift, it was just a matter of learning the syntax. Like, how do I do this particular thing in this language? I already know that this is a thing in programming. Logically, I understand how it should work. I know what it is I want to do. So how do I say it, basically, in another programming language? So this would be a really good exercise to make sure you understand those concepts. Okay? All right, so before we go to number 2, are there any questions about learning how to code?
Yeah, so Angie, I'm going to jump in here. We've already got a few questions. For those of you who are thinking of your questions right now, we know that it takes a couple minutes to type them in. So we'll get started with these that are already there. One person asks about certifications. Are there any certification courses that you recommend?
There are none that I recommend. I am personally certified in Java programming. That I don't know if I can say that that's been extremely helpful in my role. It's been helpful in, I guess, getting a job like when I first started. So you kind of prove that I really do this for real and I can pass a certification exam. But other than that, I can't say that it's been extremely beneficial to me. But in getting that certification for Java, I forced myself to really learn the language deeply. So beyond just what's taught in classwork, the exams for certifications for programming languages are quite difficult, and you really have to understand the nuances about the language. So getting a certification helped me to deeply understand about Java programming. So I wouldn't say I recommend it. It won't hurt at all if you want to go deep. I don't think it's a necessity, though.
That's great. That's great. So a couple people asked about Mark's last name. You mentioned someone named Mark.
Yeah. His name is Mark Winteringham, Winterhingham, and I have him listed on one of the later slides, so you'll get to see it again if you didn't catch the spelling.
Great. So there were a couple questions about your background and whether or not you started out as a developer, or is this something you learned during your career?
Okay, interesting. So I actually have a bachelor's and a master's in computer science. So I learned how to code as part of my degree work. I started as an automation engineer, which is crazy. So I came out of college and went right into automation. I didn't know that was a thing. I was hired for a development position, but by the time I started, they had done a reorg. That position was no longer available, and so I was placed in an automation role. So I'd done automation for like 2 years, and I still wanted to do the development position because that's what I wanted to do. So I went into the development position, and I also did that for 2 years, and I didn't enjoy that as much as automation. With automation, I felt like I was able to exercise my skills even more and at a greater level. So in development, there was like one little small piece that I would focus on, like one little feature or one little widget that you had to create. In automation, I get to do a lot more architecture and design of entire frameworks or systems. So that was more exciting to me. And then I also really have a passion for the customer advocacy part of quality assurance. So it was a really nice fit for me. So I've been doing this for almost 15 years. So really long time, automation.
That's perfect. And you answered a couple other people's questions in there about the length of your career and some of the history as well. So that's terrific. Thank you so much for kind of seeking ahead on that. I know for myself, I'm so excited about seeing test automation engineering becoming a destination career. I'm really excited about that. I think for so long it's been a pass-through career on the way to development, and that's okay. I'm cool with that. If people want to learn test automation in order to become a destination, to become a developer, that's fine. But there's so much here to do, and so much that excites me as well, figuring out how to interact with these systems differently and all that.
Right, right.
So a couple people asked about non-web development frameworks and non-web development techniques. One of the people mentioned something about the languages and protocols that we use to transmit information, like JSON and XML. What are some of the other non-web or non-UI frameworks that people should be aware of?
Oh, that's a great one. Yeah, definitely XML, JSON, if you're going to work in that space. So everybody doesn't work in that space. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this in this second piece of learn about automation. So I'll try to call out some of those technologies in this area, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm going to do a quick poll, and then we're going to move on to the next part, okay? So here is your poll, folks. It is, have you ever written code professionally? And by that, I'm saying, hey, has anyone ever paid you money to write code? So I just want to get a feel for what type of person we have here, what the experience is of folks here. I'm just going to give it a few more seconds for you all to answer this question. More than half of the folks, almost 70% of folks have voted, so that's just terrific. And it looks like we're winding down here. Perfect. So I'm going to close this poll. 78% voting, and 57% said yes. 43% said no. So that's very interesting. Great. So hopefully that informs kind of the discussion from this point forward. And I'll let you take to it again, Angie. Thanks so much.
Okay, cool. All right. So we said step number 1 is to learn how to code. So for those who answered no on the poll, you definitely want to make sure you start there. That's my advice. Once you feel like you understand programming in general, then you can go into learning about automation, okay? And there is a lot to learn about automation. So let's try to get through some of this. The first area is understanding like different layers of automation. So when people say test automation, that can mean various different things, right? It can mean they are automating UI flows, customer flows on the UI. That's by far the most common area where people are seeking test automation and help, right? Another area is mobile. That's very similar to web, but there's also some differences there as well. You can do web services. So we talked about that very briefly during the Q&A session. There are more and more jobs now that are asking for web service automation engineers, and there are not a lot of people who understand this. In fact, I got a job once, and this rec was open for months, almost a year, and they could not find somebody who was able to do web services automation. I mainly focused on UI, but I did do web services quite a bit as well. And so that's how I got that position, because they couldn't find people who did this. Right now, I'm actually looking for a web service automation engineer, and it's proven to be very problematic because people don't necessarily understand how to do web services automation, how to do web services testing. So if you are starting out, that might be an area you want to look in. If you already understand UI automation and you want to beef up your skills, web services is also a very nice area to look into. Okay, and then another layer is unit testing layer, and this is traditionally done by developers on the project, but those are automated tests as well. So these are the different layers, and in my opinion, you can't be an expert on all. I mean, I guess you can be an expert on all of these, but it's tough, right? Usually people figure out a lane and become an expert in one lane. And so these are your different choices based on job recs. The unit piece is like a given, a part of a bigger role, more so like development. But the UI, the mobile, the web services, these are different lanes that you can focus on. Choosing one of these would be great and becoming really good at that. And then if you want to beef up your skills and dive into another lane, you can. So I started out in UI. I did that for most of my career. And then once I felt I mastered that, I started looking at web services. And that really helped me out because then I started being a lot more valuable to my team because I didn't have to automate everything at the UI layer. I understood how to use web services for my automation as well. So I could couple that into what I was doing, or if things were better suited to be automated at that layer, I could do so. And then also mobile is something I picked up after the web services piece. So that's something I am able to do as well now. So yeah, just figure out like which one of these you might want to dabble in them. I suggest going on somewhere like GitHub. And you can search for like test automation or automation on GitHub, and you'll see like a lot of different projects out there. And you can download these projects and maybe launch them in your own IDE, which is Integrated Development Environment, and try to run the code, try to add to the code. As you're looking in these different spaces, see which one feels comfortable to you. Do any of them feel more natural or any of them more enjoyable? And maybe you can focus your attention there. Okay. Another thing in automation that you need to know about is complementary processes. So things like behavior-driven development, also known as BDD, and test-driven development, TDD. So behavior-driven development is bigger than automation. It's more of a process for understanding requirements and features in detail before development even begins, but it complements the test automation really nicely. There are some plugins that you can use to take the stories or features that you and your team come up with and plug them into your automation frameworks and write the code behind that. BDD is really picking up in like the UK area right now. So I looked at, I did a survey of job recs there as well, and a lot of shops were asking for BDD. So that is something that you might want to look into as well. And I have a couple of resources on my website, angiejones.tech. Around BDD and automation as well. So then you might find those helpful. And then test-driven development. This is also typically considered like a development process of a way to or an approach to go about writing your unit tests. So writing tests before you actually write the production code for that. I use this approach in automation as well, where I write my tests out and then write my automation code. So it's really helpful in either area. It's just helpful for software development in general. So those might be some things you want to check out as well. Tools. So lots of people jump right here into the tools. They're important, but there's so much more to automation than only the tools. Here are some of my go-to tools for UI. Selenium WebDriver is by far the most popular automation tool out there. Most job recs, I would say about 98% of the job recs around automation are asking for Selenium WebDriver. So That's definitely a tool that you want to be familiar with if you're going to do UI automation. Um, that tool, there's a lot of resources out there as well around that tool and trainings at, at different places online. So really can get some help there. There's books and things on it. So that should be pretty straightforward. For mobile, Appium is dominating the market. There are some other tools as well. So this is not a comprehensive list of tools. I'm giving you like the most popular ones or the ones that I use. So Appium is one. Web services, Rest Assured. I love Rest Assured for web services because it takes out a lot of the boilerplate code that I would have to write myself to get up and going before I actually even made a web service call. So it's really easy to use. I have a blog post on my site about it. Boss Dykstra, who Paul mentioned will be doing a webinar soon. He also has a lot of information on his website, and I'll have his name listed later about Rest Assured. So that's really cool. Postman is another popular tool as well for dealing with web services, and what's pretty cool about Postman is you can use it to manually test or you can use it for automation purposes as well. And Danny Dayton, Dainton, he has a series out on using Postman, and also Amber Race is also a really good resource for Postman as well. For BDD, Cucumber and SpecFlow are really popular tools for integrating your specs that you write about your stories and your features, integrating that into your automation code base and writing automated scripts around that. So those are really nice to know as well. And then for assertions, again, I'm a Java person, so JUnit is what I use the most. TestNG I also use a lot. There are other ones as well for different languages, but you want to basically have an assertion tool is what I'm trying to tell you. So most of these tools listed here will do the automation piece for you, meaning it will automate the steps that your test is trying to do, but you need some type of assertion tool as well so that you can pass or fail your test. So that's definitely one that you want to add to your tool set. Okay. Also, in learning about automation, execution enablement is pretty important as well. So I see a lot of times where newer teams or newer automation engineers, they're just now getting started. They manage to get something coded up. They have these scripts, but they don't have anywhere to run them other than their own local machine, right? And so that's not very helpful. You put a lot of the burden on yourself because your team has to constantly make requests of you to run it and for you to report the results back to them. You want to look into maybe like a continuous integration pipeline or basically some build system like Jenkins or Bamboo or one of these things, and figure out how do you tie your automation into that so that anyone can go there on this web browser, they can click a button and they can execute automation themselves. So you've taken this from being your own sole project to something that is visible and transparent and usable by the whole team. You want to look at parallelism as well. So as your automation suite grows, it's going to take longer and longer for that suite to run. So you want to look into some techniques and ways that you can basically have your test run in parallel so that your total execution time is reduced. And then look at grids and things, so they help with that type of thing and managing the execution of your test. So there's Selenium Grid, there's things like Sauce Labs, Browser Stack, these different tools or vendors have solutions for this. Okay. All right, and then last but certainly not least on the automation tip is strategy. So before you do any of that other stuff, it's really important to understand what's your game plan. It's okay to have knowledge of those other things, the tools and the techniques and how do you run this stuff. But you also need to understand you are someone, this can be a consultant, this can be a product owner, a manager, someone needs to have their hands on the pulse of the strategy, right? So I see way too many teams just jump head first into, okay, I want to learn the language and I'm going to pick up a tool and then I'm just going to automate everything, right? And that typically fails because no one was thinking about what is our game plan? Why are we automating? What is the purpose of it, right? That's extremely important, and that should help guide you in all the rest of the things. If you understand why are we doing automation, right? Is it to reduce regression time? Is it to make continuous integration quicker and give feedback to developers? What is it? Like, take a step back and understand that. Once you understand that, that'll guide everything else. That'll help you choose which layers you want to automate against. That'll help you choose what tools make the most sense. It'll help you choose which language you want to pick up, right? Another thing about language, I forgot to say, with language, sometimes people tend to pick the language that their development team is using, right? So as we looked at that chart and I showed you the most popular languages, if your developer language is not on there on the chart at all or is one of the bottom ones, just be cognizant of this. It's okay if you want to do the same language as your developers. However, I always think about how does that transfer? Is this a role that I see myself in for my entire career? Or am I going to move on to another job? And I want my skills to be marketable. So if I'm going to go through the effort of enrolling in a class and learning how to program, I want it to be something that's beneficial for me long term, not just right now. So there's, I know of someone who they wanted to program in some obscure language that their developers were using, and that one that environment that they were in was not really looking towards automation, right? They thought it was something cool we might do, but they didn't really have a lot of buy-in from management and executives to put forth the effort to actually get automation going. And so they wanted to leave that role and go into another role where they could do more automation. However, the language that they chose to use was not something that was very transferable. So when they went to look for a job, remember the chart that I showed you, those were the top languages that were being asked of. And if you know some other language and you have not really done automation much, no fault of your own, but your company just really wasn't into it like that, then you don't come across as competitive for that role. So just be sure to keep that in mind as well. All right. Paul, any questions?
Oh, of course, we have this really long list of questions here, so that was terrific. I'm gonna have to pick out a few of these, and what we'll do is Angie and I will get back on these later. She's already volunteered to go through quite a few of them and answer later. There might be too many for her to be able to get back to you on later. But one of the points here that people had, they were asking about web services. So you had a slide where you were talking about the different types of test automation. One was mobile, one was UI, one was unit, and then another was web services. And people wanted a little more clarity on what that meant. And they asked questions like, is that a REST API test,
Yes.
or what exactly is that?
Yes, so I'm talking mostly like REST API. There's also SOAP APIs. Most of the shops I'm seeing today are using REST APIs. So that's what I mean by web services.
That's great. I think people wanted a few of the names that you mentioned. So will you make your slides available or make your references available at some point so
Yeah,
that
I'm
people
going to
can get
show
those?
that in a couple of slides. We'll have the name.
Perfect.
And so they're all listed out. So.
Perfect. And this is all recorded, so you can always go back and look at the recording and get any of those that you want, folks. So I'm not going to spend our time on that. I guess there was a couple questions about, someone mentioned strategy, and they said that was so important. That is one of the things that we tend to help out with at Beaufort Fairmont, so I'll just put in that shameless plug there. But let's see, folks asked about, oh, do you use the same programming language as your developers?
So I have a different school of thought on this than most people. Um, I I use what's best for whatever I'm trying to do as far as automation is concerned. I don't necessarily go to the language that my developers are using, and I'll tell you why. One, like I said, they might be using something that's obscure and it just wouldn't be of much benefit for me to learn this language. Two is I think a lot of times management is under this misconception that if you build this framework in the same language that your developers are used to working with, then they will help you with test automation. Okay, I've been doing this 15 years. I've yet to see that materialize. Um, a lot of times the developers are just not that interested, and they will help a little bit, right? So they might help maintain the tests. If they break them, they'll fix them. That's great. But as far as, oh yeah, we have 10 things we want to automate this sprint. Yeah, I'm the developer. Give me 5 of those and you take 5.
I think we lost you there, Angie. My apologies. It looks like the audio just went out there. Angie, if you can hear us, we're missing what you're saying. Okay, so I hear, yeah, she's gone.
So I had to learn Swift.
There she is. Angie, we lost you.
Did I cut out?
You
Oh
did.
man, I was feeling it.
You were on it too. It looked like you were really answering the heck out of that question.
I was. Okay. All right, let me try again. So I said that I don't make it default to build my automation framework in the language that my developers are using. And there's a couple of reasons why I don't. Uh, One is because there's a misconception, and this is usually from like a testing manager or something that will say, if we build it in the same language that the developers are using, then they'll help us out with this automation thing, right? I've been doing this for a very long time. I've yet to see that materialize in the way that the team thought it would, right? So they may help with fixing a test that they've broken with their code. That's great. But as far as if we have 10 things we want to automate this sprint, development takes 5 and QA takes 5, I'm not seeing that level of dedication. So picking up like some obscure language and running with that in hopes that development will help out, I don't think is a good idea. I tend to look at what's best for the automation team, right? So I look at what open source tools are available to complement this language. I also look at support. So how much is this language used, and is there a lot of support online? So if I run into issues, can we easily get those resolved? Or if we're coding in some weird language that nobody's using, then we're going to box ourselves in, right? Very recently, I told you I picked up Swift, and that was because that's the language that my developers are using. Now, there was a reason I chose that is because I wanted to plug into their production code base in utilize a lot of the things that they had there. So that made sense in that case. And there were automation tools, not Selenium and things like that, but Apple has some automation tools that I could use with that language. So I had to kind of weigh the pros and cons there.
That's great. Thank you so much. So there's a lot of other questions here. I want to make sure we get through all the content. I'm going to do one more poll here, and then we're going to get back to it. So I'd like to know a little bit more about you. What is your current role? So select one of the following: tester, test automation engineer, developer, manager, or other. And people are very quickly answering this, which is good. I assume that means they want to get through to the rest of the content. So that's good stuff. This is very helpful for me. It's very helpful for Angie in learning about who it is that attends these and learning who we're speaking with so that we can tailor these things over time. I know Angie likes this kind of feedback. I like it a lot. There's also going to be a survey at the end of this. When you log out of this session, I'm going to close this poll up. We've got about 80% of the people. There's going to be a survey at the end of this, and I'm going to ask you a couple. There's only like 3 questions, I think. It's very quick to go through, and it's very helpful to me. So please fill that out when we're done here. So it looks like the majority of people are testers, which is what I would expect, about 20% test automation engineers, and the managers showed up strong today as well. So that's good. I'm going to hide these results and we'll get right back to this. Thank you so much.
Okay, so 1 and 2 were the main pathways. So learning how to code and then learning about automation. Number 3, final step, is just continue to learn. So I've been doing this for quite a while and still learn a ton about automation. The trends, they change constantly. We have new voices and people are sharing how they've done automation, how they failed, how they succeeded, and things like this are very valuable in helping us grow as an industry. So here are my recommendations on how you continue to learn. There have been a lot of books written around test automation. Some have stories, like stories from the field about projects and how they've gone. So things like that are really helpful, where you can see where other people, where they succeeded, where they made mistakes, and kind of learn from those as well. There's also, of course, your technical books, your how to do this type of books in automation as well. So those are helpful. Blogs and articles, be sure to read those. I have my blog that you can subscribe to. Beaufort Fairmont has a blog. There are a lot of different people, and I'll give you some names in a minute. A lot of people that are writing blogs and articles, and so those are great ways to keep updated on different strategies and techniques. You want to watch webinars like the one that you're on today, so I don't have to dwell on that. You already know the benefit to that. Podcasts. So there's some podcasts around testing, around automation. I listen to those and hear from different experts, and so I just listen to them like on my commute to work, and learn so much about new tools that I've never heard of or that I've never tried before. And sometimes it's like, oh wow, that's exactly what I need for this problem that I needed to solve. And while I was going to go try to build something from scratch, I can go and look at that tool. So that's very helpful. Attending conferences is also extremely helpful. So listening to the talks, going to the different workshops. As Paul mentioned, he and I will be doing an automation workshop at TISCA in February in North Carolina. So that's a really good one to check out. I also have a bunch of other places that I'll be attending and presenting at in 2018. So you can go to my website. I have an upcoming events link, and you can check out all of those to see if there's something in your area. Working with other automation engineers, this has probably been the biggest help for me in my career. So I see sometimes where people just want to go into automation, and so they're seeking an opportunity to do that. That makes sense. But be sure to ask, like, who else is working on automation? If you are new to automation, I really don't recommend going and starting someone's automation efforts or being the sole automation engineer, right? Because yes, there's going to be a lot for you to learn, but it's going to be also really hard, and you're probably going to make a lot of mistakes. When I've worked places where there are other automation engineers, the speed at which I learn is so much greater than when I'm doing it alone, right? So I worked in a place and we had a whole team of automation engineers that elevated me so much higher in my career because I just learned a ton from being with other people who were doing this as well. Okay, and then last but not least, follow the gurus. So here I have 2 slides of people that have been very beneficial to me, who I constantly learn from, and I recommend that you follow these people. So of course I had put me on there because I think I have a lot to add, but Paul as well, Boz, Paul Grazafi is also really good, especially managers or architects. You want to look at Paul. He covers a lot of business type value about automation, so that's really good. Boz, he does a lot on service virtualization, which is the next podcast that both of Fairmont will do. He also does a lot on web services, so he has some of those open source projects I told you about. He has a lot of tutorials on that. Jess Ingrassilino, she has been writing a lot lately about various different topics in automation, so definitely follow her. Alan Richardson is amazing in technical content, so he has been very useful in providing things that are not necessarily your everyday automation things. So he goes a lot into a lot of different technical techniques, like getting into like the dev console, and he goes like really behind the scenes to show you how you might be able to beef up your skills. Richard Bradshaw is really great. He focuses a lot on mobile automation, automation strategies and concepts in general. He does whiteboard videos with techniques, so he's really good. Amber Race, performance automation and testing, also web services. She's really good. Mark Winteringham, that's the name I gave you before. So he has the course on the website and understanding that. He also does a lot on web services, so he's a web service guru as well. Joe Colantonio has a podcast. That podcast is Test Talks, and he has automation people come on every week and provides information about different things that they're working on. Ashley Hansberger, she's an architect, so she has that big picture view of automation, so you want to follow her. Katrina Cloakley, same thing, so she's a coach, and she provides a lot of information on how you can work together with different people on the team. So automation and testing and development, she's really good at that. Nicolay, he has a lot of course material on automation, so if you're one of those people who want to do it yourself, that's a great site to check out. Karina Pip, she does a lot on UI automation and cool techniques. TJ is very interesting, especially for people who are new and trying to transition into automation. He did manual testing for about 20 years, and then he transitioned into automation. And so he's been learning a lot on his own. What's great about TJ is he documents all of these things that he's learning. And he has a website, and he goes step by step on, okay, I'm picking up this new tool or this new technique, and here are things that you can learn about it. So things that I haven't used before, I can go to TJ's site and learn from him. And then Iran, he is really good in mobile automation as well. So that's my list of people, the gurus. These slides will be available, so you don't have to try to scribble all of this down. All right, I'm done. Paul, I don't know if we have time for questions, or I know you wanted to do a raffle.
Yeah, we're running out of time here, so here's what I'm going to do. Make sure to write down your questions in the question box now, or get back with Angie on Twitter. You can see her Twitter handle down there. It's TechGirl1908. Also, is there an email address you're willing to give out to folks to right to
It's
you?
easier to catch me on Twitter, so my email box is a cluttered mess. But yeah, if you just DM me, my DMs are open.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm ready for this. I'm ready for this. How do I get back the presenter thing here? I need to
Oh,
be.
let's see.
I think I could just make myself
Okay,
presenter.
cool.
And let me see which one. This is the right screen. Show my screen. Okay. So who's it going to be? Who is going to get this Amazon $50 Amazon gift card? And I still don't have my drum roll, Angie. Hopefully that helps a little bit. So it's going to be Mike D, and there's only one Mike with a D for the last name on this. And so Mike, you are the winner of a $50 Amazon gift card, folks. Make sure to stick on this for just a minute after we close out. We're going to have a survey there that can really help out with how we can help you. One of the things that Angie mentioned was about learning. We're going to put together an offering for learning here at Beaufort Fairmont for automation engineers. I don't know what that's going to look like yet. I need your help. So there were 200 and some odd people on this webinar, and you all have ideas about what could help you. So let me know what those are. Send me a note. Here's my contact information. One of the other ways that I have been helping folks lately is through office hours, and it's working very well. So if you are an automation engineer and you're constantly learning and you run into issues every week, we can put together weekly office hours, and I can be right there to help you with those. So you kind of, batch up your questions across the course of a week or a couple weeks or whatever, and we'll work together on those, screen share, pair program right through them. Or if you have other questions about test automation or whatever, we can do that. So you know me, Beaufort Fairmont, you know the company, and we're happy to be here to help you. Make sure to continue to sign up for webinars as they go along. You heard a little bit about our blog there. Angie, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you in February at TISC. It's going to be awesome.
Yay.
Cool. So thanks, everybody. I'm going to close this down, and once again, stick on the line to do this survey. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.